how social media can make you lose money without realizing it, and how to avoid it. Cold open, you already lost. If you opened social media today, you probably lost money, not later, not eventually, already. And the most dangerous part is this. You don't know when it happened. You didn't click buy. You didn't make a conscious decision. You just scrolled, watched, reacted. And somewhere in that sequence, something shifted inside you. A standard moved. A desire appeared. A comparison was planted. That's where the transaction happens, not when you spend, when you start wanting. This is not about ads. Ads are obvious. This is about something far more precise, a system that observes you long enough to predict you. And once it predicts you, it stops showing you content and starts shaping your behavior. You think you're in control because you can close the app at any time. But control was never about time spent. It's about what stays with you after you leave. The thought you didn't question. The product you suddenly feel you need. The lifestyle that now feels just slightly out of reach, but close enough to chase. That's where the money starts leaking. And if you don't see the mechanism, you will keep playing a game where the rules were written to make you lose slowly, consistently, and invisibly. Now here's the part most people never realize. You were already positioned to lose before you even opened the app. You were spending before you even opened the app. The moment you feel the urge to check your phone, the process has already started. That impulse is not neutral. It's conditioned, built over time through repetition, reward, and subtle psychological reinforcement. You're not opening the app randomly. You're responding to a trigger that was designed, tested, and optimized to bring you back at the exact moment your attention is most vulnerable. Boredom, stress, curiosity. The system learns which one works on you. And once you open it, you're not starting from zero. You're entering an environment that already knows your patterns, what you pause on, what you ignore, what makes you feel inferior, what makes you react. Before you even see the first piece of content, the algorithm has already filtered reality specifically for you. That means your next desire is not spontaneous. It's pre-selected. You think you're exploring. In reality, you're being guided. And guidance, when it's invisible, becomes control. So by the time you feel like buying something, upgrading something, changing something in your life, that decision didn't begin there. It began earlier, in the moment you reached for your phone without thinking. That's the first cost, and almost no one tracks it. Attention is not the product your future decisions are. You've heard the phrase before, if it's free, you are the product. That sounds accurate, but it's incomplete. Your attention alone has limited value. What the system really wants is something far more profitable, your future decisions. Attention is just the entry point. Data is the real asset. Every second you spend scrolling is being converted into behavioral patterns. What you stop on, what you replay, what you ignore, what makes you hesitate for half a second longer than usual. That hesitation is worth more than your click, because hesitation reveals intent, and intent is predictable. Once your behavior becomes predictable, it becomes monetizable, not just through ads, but through timing. The system learns when you are most likely to act, when your resistance is low, when your emotions are unstable enough to influence your judgment. That's when it moves, not randomly, precisely. You are not being shown content because it is relevant. You are being shown content because it increases the probability of a future action, a purchase, a subscription, a shift in preference, a change in identity. And here is where the loss becomes invisible. You don't feel manipulated because nothing forces you. You feel like you chose. But the options you were given were not neutral. They were selected based on what you were most likely to accept. That is not influence. That is behavioral steering. Over time, this compounds. Your standards shift. Your expectations adjust. Your desires evolve. Not based on your values, but based on what the system has learned will keep you engaged and spending. You think you are adapting to the world. In reality, the world you see is adapting to extract more from you. And once your decisions are shaped, your identity follows. That's where the next layer begins. Live manipulation breakdown. You don't notice manipulation when it feels like your idea. Watch the sequence carefully. You open the app for a neutral reason, maybe boredom, maybe habit. The first pieces of content are familiar, safe. Then something shifts. A post appears that is slightly above your current reality. Better lifestyle, better body, better results. You don't react consciously, but your brain does. A small comparison is triggered. You keep scrolling. Now the content gets sharper. Someone wearing something you didn't think about before. A product placed inside a life you want. Not presented as an ad. Presented as normal. That's the key. It doesn't feel like selling. It feels like reality. Your baseline starts moving. Then comes the reinforcement. Comments, likes, numbers. Social proof stacked in a way that removes doubt. If this many people validate it, it must be right. Now your resistance drops. Next, urgency appears. Limited drop. Only today. Last units. Not aggressive. Just enough to create pressure without activating defense. And now the final trigger. Identity. This is who you could be, not the product. The version of you attached to it. That's when the desire locks in. You don't say, I want this item. You say, I want to feel like that. And that is the most expensive sentence you can think. Pause for a second. Think about the last thing you bought impulsively. Not the big purchase. The small one. The one you justified quickly. That wasn't random. It followed a sequence almost identical to this. The system didn't convince you directly. It built the environment where convincing you became unnecessary. And once you understand that, the problem is no longer what you see. It's what you start believing is normal. The status trap. You think you're buying products, you're not. You're buying position. Social media doesn't compete on utility. It competes on perception. Every image, every video, every curated moment is engineered to signal one thing: where someone stands in the hierarchy. And the moment you consume it, you are automatically placed somewhere below or above it. You don't choose to compare. Your brain does it instantly. Where am I in relation to this? That question is where the trap begins, because once you feel slightly below, even by a small margin, your behavior changes. You become more receptive, more impulsive, more willing to close the gap. That gap is where money leaves. The system constantly feeds you upgraded versions of reality, not extreme enough to reject, but elevated enough to create tension. Better clothes, better environments, better routines, all presented as accessible, close enough to reach, far enough to feel behind. And that tension does not stay on the screen, it follows you. You start questioning your current lifestyle. What used to feel sufficient now feels average. What used to feel like progress now feels slow. So you adjust. You spend a little more, upgrade a little faster, justify a little easier. Not because you need it, because you don't want to feel left behind in a game you never agreed to play. And the most dangerous part is this: there is no finish line, because the standard keeps moving, not by accident, by design. So while you believe you are improving your life, what you are actually doing is chasing a reference point that is constantly being pushed forward. That is how financial erosion becomes invisible. Not through one big mistake, through continuous small upgrades driven by silent comparison. And if that's what you see, wait until you understand what the algorithm is actually optimizing for. The algorithm doesn't show you what you like. You think the algorithm learns your preferences to give you a better experience. That sounds logical. It's also misleading. The algorithm is not optimizing for satisfaction. It's optimizing for reaction. There's a difference. Content that makes you calm, stable, and content with your current life reduces engagement. It slows you down. It closes loops. That is not profitable. So the system prioritizes what destabilizes you just enough to keep you moving. Curiosity, envy, urgency, aspiration, doubt. Not extreme enough to push you away, just enough to keep you slightly unsettled. Because a stable mind does not scroll. A reactive mind does. And once you are in a reactive state, your decision-making changes. You don't evaluate, you respond. You don't question, you absorb. That's when influence becomes efficient. The algorithm doesn't need to convince you directly. It just needs to maintain you in a state where your resistance is lowered and your impulses are elevated. That state is measurable. How long you watch, how fast you scroll, where you pause, what you revisit. Every microaction feeds back into the system, and the system adjusts. Not to make you happier, to make you more predictable under emotional pressure. Because predictability under emotion is where spending happens. Think about it. You rarely make impulsive purchases when you feel completely stable and satisfied. You make them when something is slightly off, when you feel behind, when you feel like you need a shift. That feeling is not random, it is continuously reinforced. The more emotionally unstable your feed makes you, the more valuable you become, not as a person, as a behavioral asset. And once you're in that state long enough, something else starts to break. Your ability to make disciplined decisions. The hidden cost. Decision fatigue. You don't lose money when you make big decisions. You lose it when you stop caring about small ones. Every scroll forces a choice. Stay or skip, like or ignore, open or move on. These are micro decisions, and they look insignificant. But your brain doesn't treat them that way. Each one consumes cognitive energy, and the problem is not the effort itself, it's the accumulation. By the time you leave the app, your brain is not sharp. It's saturated. You've processed hundreds of signals, evaluated dozens of options, compared realities that don't belong to your life. You don't feel tired in a physical way, you feel indifferent. And indifference is where discipline collapses. That's when the real financial damage starts. You stop analyzing, you stop delaying, you stop questioning. The decision becomes simple. It's not that expensive, I deserve it, it's just this once. Those sentences don't come from clarity, they come from exhaustion. This is why most impulsive purchases happen late, after long exposure, after repeated input. When your ability to resist has already been worn down, not because you are weak, because your brain has reached a point where conserving energy feels more important than protecting money. And the system knows this. It doesn't try to sell to you when you are sharp. It positions the opportunity when you are tired enough to accept it. That's precision. So the loss doesn't happen when you see the product, it happens earlier, when your capacity to say no quietly disappears. And once that happens, you don't just spend more, you start needing the system to regulate how you feel. The loop. Why you can't stop. You think you keep coming back because the content is good. That's not the reason. You come back because the system learned how to regulate your state. It starts with a trigger, a moment where something feels slightly off. Boredom, stress, restlessness. Nothing extreme. Just enough discomfort to seek relief. You open the app. The first inputs give you stimulation. Fast, effortless, immediate. Your brain shifts. The discomfort fades. You feel engaged again. Then the comparison begins. Subtle at first, then sharper. You see something you don't have. Something you didn't think about before. Something that now feels relevant. Your state drops. Now you feel slightly behind, slightly dissatisfied. Not enough to leave. Enough to keep searching, so you scroll more. Looking for relief from the feeling the platform itself helped create. And occasionally you get it. A post that makes you laugh. Something that inspires you. Something that gives you a temporary sense of alignment again. That reward reinforces the loop. Trigger, scroll, stimulation, comparison, drop, search, relief, repeat. This is not addiction to content. This is dependency on regulation. You are using the platform to change how you feel, and the platform is controlling the intensity and timing of those emotional shifts. That gives it leverage, because the moment you rely on something to regulate your state, your behavior becomes predictable, and predictable behavior can be guided. That's why stopping feels harder than it should. Not because you lack discipline, because the loop is designed to keep you slightly unstable, then offer just enough relief to bring you back. And as long as that loop continues, you are not just consuming, you are being conditioned. Now the question changes, not why you scroll, but what that scrolling is turning you into. Breaking the system. You don't break this system by using less of it. You break it by seeing it clearly enough that it stops working on you. Control doesn't come from discipline alone. It comes from awareness applied at the right moment. The moment you feel a shift. Not after. during. When something you see creates tension, that is not random, that is a trigger doing its job. Most people react. A few people recognize it. That difference defines who pays and who profits. Start by watching your own reactions, not the content, your response to it. When you feel the urge to want something, don't follow it. Label it. This is comparison. This is urgency. This is identity pressure. The moment you name it, you create distance. And distance breaks automatic behavior. Then you change your environment, not based on what you like, based on what moves you forward. If something consistently creates tension without creating value, it's not neutral. It's extracting from you. Remove it. Your feed is not entertainment. It's conditioning. Shape it or it shapes you. Next, you build a barrier between impulse and action. Every purchase that originates from social media gets delayed, not avoided. Delayed. Time kills emotional decisions. What feels urgent now rarely survives 24 hours of clarity. And that gap is where control returns. You stop entering it as a consumer and start using it as a tool to learn, to distribute, to create, to monetize. The same mechanisms that influence behavior can be studied, replicated, and redirected. Most people stay at the surface. A small percentage understands the structure, and once you understand the structure, the system stops being a threat. It becomes leverage. But that shift only happens when you stop asking how to avoid influence and start asking how influence actually works. You're either the target or the operator. Social media is not dangerous. What's dangerous is moving inside it without awareness. Because every time you open it, something is happening whether you notice or not. Your perception is being adjusted. Your standards are being recalibrated. Your behavior is being guided. And none of that requires your permission. The system doesn't need you to be distracted. It needs you to stay unconscious. That's enough. Because an unconscious user does not question desire, does not track influence, does not notice patterns. They just react. And reaction is the most valuable state you can be in for someone else. So the real division is not between people who use social media and people who don't. It's between those who understand the mechanics and those who are shaped by them. Every day you log in, you are placed on one side of that line. Either you are being studied, influenced, and gradually extracted from, or you are observing, learning, and positioning yourself to use the same dynamics in your favor. There is no neutral position, because the system is always moving. The only question is whether you are moving with intention or being moved without realizing it. And once you see that clearly, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. The system was never built to make you lose fast. It was built to make you lose slowly, without ever feeling like you're losing. That is why most people never escape it. And that is exactly why a few people dominate inside it.